Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is M.A.M.S. I currently serve as a VAWA project coordinator at Southwestern College, VAWA being the Violence Against Women Act. As you may know, Southwestern College leads the San Diego Campus Violence Prevention Consortium. The consortium includes National University, Palomar College, and to a limited capacity, San Diego State University. The grant that is issued and administered through the Office of Violence Against Women supports the consortium's efforts to bring awareness to member college communities about the issues underlying violence against individuals. The grant itself is termed as Violence Against Women Act, but has been expanded not only to include women, but also to all the individuals. The areas that we focus on under this consortium and through this grant include, but not limited to domestic violence, sexual assaults, sexual harassment, dating violence, as well as stalking. All of this is to support the prevention of such acts and supports those that have endured these acts and seeking survivorship. Survivorship meaning overcoming, dealing with the impact that some of these things can cause, but also joining in with other individuals and encourage them to also reach survivorship. This Student Survivors Story Panel is held in honor of 2021 Domestic Violence Awareness Month. The speakers of this panel are Sonia Camargo, President of Associated Student Organization and Chicano Student Movement of Aztlán, Brenda Leticia Carmona, President of Association of Chicana Activists, Claudia Perez-Favela, President of Mothers and Mother Scholars, Sanchez, founder of Mothers and Mother Scholars. The moderator for this panel is Mary Papagolos, the Clinical Supervisor at South Bay Community Services, or SBCS. Okay, thank you so much for being here today. So let's get started. As a reminder that this session is being recorded. So please feel free to share the recording with your friends when they are more convenient to view this panel. I'll post it to YouTube. Now I will hand it over to Mary.
Thank you so much. And thank you to our panelists for allowing me to come in today and really moderate this session. I think the primary goal for today is to just bring awareness to, really common components of domestic violence and help folks listening and, help the folks listening to understand what those are. So I think we'd like to start with Claudia, who's really going to define domestic violence a little further for us, and then we'll move into some discussion with our panelists.
Good afternoon. My name is Claudia Perez-Favela. I'm the current president of Southwestern College Club M.A.M.S, Mothers and Mothers Scholars. And today I will talking about what domestic violence is. I will share my screen for the presentation. Can you see the presentation?
Okay. Yes.
Okay. What is domestic violence? Domestic violence is one of the largest social problems facing America. Problems facing America today. This experience can bring an adversely effect in women and children. Domestic violence refers to violent behavior between partners. They could be former or current, Domestic violence could be when one partner tries to exert power into another, power and control into another, usually through fear. Domestic violence, it can include physical, sexual, social, economical, spiritual, uh, verbal, abuse. I'm sorry. Then inside domestic violence, there is another term, there is family violence. Family violence is a term that refers violence between family members, which include violence between current or former intimate partners, between parents to their children, siblings, and any other members of a family group. A behavior towards the victims can include control their finances, preventing them from contacting family and friends, demeaning and humiliating them, treating or their children with injury or acts of physical violence. Domestic violence hurts and can be devastating for the children. They can have a hard impact in them. Uh, Sorry if I go too faster. In the United States, 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men have been victims of some form of physical violence by an intimate partner with their lifetime. Every 9 seconds, a woman is being assaulted or beaten. To know the signs, domestic violence can involve a range of different behaviors. Knowing the signs can help you recognize when violence may be occurring and allow you to take appropriate steps to intervene. Law childrenhood. Domestic violence includes physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, social abuse, verbal, spiritual, and economic. Remember that you are not alone, and together we can end domestic and sexual assault. This is all for my part. I will, sorry, pass the voice to Mary.
Thank you so much, Claudia, for defining that further for us. So I think for our conversation, it might be helpful. I'm just going to ask you to stop sharing your screen at the bottom and then bring us back. Thank you. Okay, perfect. So I think it'd be great if we started off with, some of the panelists sharing their stories. Brenda, I'd like to really ask you if you would mind starting with your story, as well as focusing on just some of the warning signs or red flags that you want people to know about in terms of domestic violence. And kind of before we move into that, I'll kind of keep track of time, and I might kind of raise my hand if we need to look at wrapping up the story or so. So I'll kind of moderate that for you.
Perfect, thank you. So my name is Brenda. I am a survivor of domestic abuse and violence, and also grooming. I know that's not necessarily something that a lot of people know also, although domestic violence does, sometimes the signs do appear like physically, whether they're bruises or cuts in areas where you wouldn't necessarily get hurt that easily. There are also many other warning signs. So I'll speak a little bit more on the grooming side onto it and those warning signs. Yeah, so although, I got a new phone and I was, I finally had like my first little Chromebook and everything. And I just started learning how to use the internet and stuff. At that time, I was I was maybe like 16 years old, and I was, very, very alone. My parents weren't necessarily there all the time because they were working, and my brother and my sister weren't necessarily the same or around the same age as me. So I had a lot of time to myself, or I would just go to libraries, or I'll do things on my own, very young. But unfortunately, I was talking to somebody online at that time. It was MySpace or whatever. And, I felt very special. Like, this person really said like beautiful things, like, oh, I was so sweet and so nice, and that I look very beautiful and everything, and that my hair was luxurious, and it looked very smooth, which was one of the first warning signs of it. At that time, I didn't necessarily have my hair down for somebody to actually notice it. So to me, that was quite odd. But then I didn't really pay attention to that. I kept going. I kept talking to this person, and we had a couple conversations back and forth. He kept asking me my age, which was another sign, another warning sign there. And he told me that he was 17, that there wasn't necessarily like that big of a difference or anything. It was just 1 year of a difference. I'm like, okay, that's good. Yeah, no, later on, it started becoming a little bit more, I started becoming more dependent on this person. Like, oh, if I wasn't like responding soon enough, then the rest of the messages that he would send me would be a little bit more aggressive. I've had taken pictures that I shouldn't have been taking pictures like of myself, because I thought that if I didn't do it, like, he was upset, and he was technically, at least in those messages back and forth, like, he sounded very upset, and everything, and I felt obligated to do that. So those were other signs, just feeling obligated to do something that you don't want to do, feeling like you can't make your own choices or your own decisions, regardless whether you felt uncomfortable or not. Those were the biggest ones. And if I defied it at any moment, like, he was very angry. And he always wanted to meet me like fairly soon after we had met online. And I had postponed as much as I could. At that time, I still felt like a little weird about it. Didn't feel all that comfortable. And then just one day he's like, oh, let's just meet up at Starbucks, and we can just grab a coffee. And so I said, okay. And at that time I was taking the public transportation here and there, from school and home, and then, well, what else I need to do? So I was like, yeah, sure. Like, we'll meet this day, like early in the morning. And he really wanted to make sure like we would meet later on, like around like nighttime, almost nighttime. And I'm like, no, I can only do it in the morning. Like, that's the only time that I'm available. And so he finally agreed to that, and I went to meet him. And when I realized who it was, this person came up to me in the Starbucks, and he asked if I was Brenda. My heart completely sank, and I was so angry with myself, because this person did not look 17. This person looked like he was in his 30s. At that time, when I was 16, my brother is 20 years older than me, so he was 36. That's why I realized that that person wasn't around my age, because I live with somebody who's about his same age, my brother, and that I don't know, I was so angry with myself, with it. Everything hit me quite soon, where all of these signs, all of these things that I didn't want to do, that I felt uncomfortable with, it all came rushing back. And I was like, you know what, like that, I shouldn't have done this in the first place. And I should have listened to my gut. So when he asked me if I was Brenda, I was like, oh no, I don't know who you're talking about. And then I walked away. I went immediately to another like bus that I knew that would take me close to home. And that was it. I never saw that person again. But to this day, I don't feel comfortable just meeting people online. I have, I have a lot of friends who like, they use Tinder and everything, and I cannot do that. I have that consistent fear that what if I see this person again, whether it's in life or it's just at the other side of my phone, I can't do it anymore. And I've come to terms with it. I went to therapy for it. And to this day, I still have that little fear in me of what could have happened if I would have stepped out of that Starbucks with that man. Would I even see my parents again? Would they even know what happened to me? Yeah. So that
Brenda.
is what I like to share.
Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing your story. And I realize even as you go back and share, right, some of the emotions come up almost as if it were happening now or happening, today. But I appreciate you being so vulnerable about your experience. I think a few things that really stood out is these signs of compliments and making you feel special, making you feel a certain way very early on that you were describing. But then you also described this obligation and feeling obligated and being worried about getting a certain type of response if you didn't do or respond with what was asked. So you definitely highlighted a lot of really important warning signs. Also, I think the lack of voice and choice that you felt at certain times. So just wanting to kind of highlight those that were in your story. I think, if we could also kind of pass it over to Sonia to share a little bit about your personal experience, and also just what are some of the main things that you want folks to know about domestic violence? Sorry.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sonia. I'm president of ASO at Southwestern College. Do you want me to answer the question first, or you want me to do my story first?
However you like. It might be helpful as you tell your story. You can at the end talk about what you want people to know.
Okay. Well, I am a survivor of domestic violence a few times. My ex-husband and I had a very volatile relationship. My 4-year-old daughter's dad, excuse me, it was very abusive. He was physical, but it was also emotional. He from the very beginning, he was very like protective, possessive, but not like you wouldn't know it. It's hard to explain. Like he would let me do whatever I wanted to do, but he would make me feel so guilty about it or make me feel so bad, emotionally, mentally. His thing was more mental. When he did hit me, it was for stupid reasons. I didn't buy him what he wanted, or something dumb. I mean, it's always dumb, obviously, but I didn't understand it, and I didn't understand how I could let myself get there again, after being married to somebody like that and getting away from it, but we shared a daughter, so I stuck through it. I kept trying to, not because I had hope or faith, because of that, I'm not gonna lie to myself. I knew that, he would never change, but I just thought, he wouldn't do it in front of her. And then one day he did. When I was holding her in my arms, he hit me, and it was crazy. but I still stayed after that. Well, I left for a few weeks, but I went back, and it's kind of a long story why I went back. I kind of had no choice. And then when I started Southwestern College, I met a lot of people who wanted to support me, and they helped me get away, and it's crazy, I'm not a weak woman, and that's what I used to think, being in this situation, I used to think that I was weak, and I know that I'm not, and I used to think it was my fault, I stayed, everybody says it, oh, well, they stayed, they must have liked it. Nobody knows everybody's circumstances. Nobody knows what they're going through or why they stay or don't stay, even to this day, I still have a lot of issues. Like my self-esteem isn't as good as it used to be. I used to be very assertive. I mean, I am assertive now, but I used to be very more assertive. I used to be more secure of myself, and I'm not as much anymore. I miss the person that I was. They take. Well, he took a lot from me. People who knew me before and know me now, they're like, well, what happened? Like, it's crazy, But if anything, I want people to know that it's not our fault, and that we're not weak. We have to lean on somebody, get away. If you can't get away, lean on somebody as much as you can, because it isn't easy. If I wasn't who I am, he would have broke me, because he did everything. I mean, everything. Like, there would be nights I wouldn't sleep because I had to stay awake with our daughter. Like, it was bad. It was bad. But of course, I don't want my daughter to.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. You're speaking to something that's so important, that you realized it wasn't your fault, and you really started to lean on the support of friends or family or whoever could be there for you. How did you come to realize it wasn't your fault? What helped you get there?
Well, I always knew it wasn't my fault. Like I said, I had been in a previous domestic violence relationship, and so I always knew it wasn't my fault. No matter how much they would try to make it seem like it is, I knew better. I'm not one of those women you can brainwash very easily. It wasn't easy. It took 8 years for him to get me to where I was. And so I mean, I always knew. And then before I was actually a violent person. Like, I would love to fight, like, all day long. Now I'm not. I don't know. It's just, for me personally, I already knew that it wasn't my fault. I don't know how to make everybody else understand that it's not their fault. Just nobody deserves to be hit. Nobody deserves to be put through any of that, emotional, physical. None of that. Happiness and love don't require abuse and belittling.
Thank you so much for speaking to that. I think it's a really important point, because I think that there can be a lot of like self-blame or guilt, but recognizing that it's not your fault is a really important part to that. So I appreciate you speaking to that. And just a couple other things that really stood out, just that not that you're weak, that it takes a lot of strength actually to endure that kind of environment and that kind of abuse. So it's quite the opposite. Just like you said, that not weak at all, but rather a lot of strength to be able to survive that. So I appreciate you pointing that out, and just the impact that it has, right, on your self-confidence or self-esteem, and how that's part of what you have to recover from after something like that. And I really appreciate you naming the impact that it can have on somebody who endures that.
Well, thank you for having me here.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Thank you so much for sharing. I think we'll go ahead and move to Anna. And I think Anna, just really speaking to whatever parts of your story that you want to share. And also, what do you think you've done or is important to survive, to heal, to recover?
Hello, everyone. My name is Sanchez. You can call me Anna. My pronouns are her, she, ella. And thank you for having the space for all of us to bring awareness and to allow me to share my story. Growing up, I was sexually molested by my babysitter's husband. And I never really spoke about it. I just kind of grew up, with that happening. And I feel that oftentimes in families, there is this, it's just cultural to not speak on certain situations that you encounter. And that is what happened to me. So I kind of took that all in with me and kind of never looked back. Then high school came and I grew up without my dad for the most part. And I always seek that just to have a man in my life, and finally met somebody, which later I found out was older than me as well. And he was very nice, then became very, very abusive to the point that I could not finish high school. I couldn't go to school. He was physically abusive, mentally abusive. And something very important that I want to mention is that, as you mentioned, to speak about it, to always seek help, to not be afraid. I know it's hard. I know it takes everyone's own personal time to heal, to speak on it. And sometimes we feel that others are going to judge us for our experiences. And don't worry about that. Know that your life is important, your mental health, and by speaking up, you don't only help yourself, but you help many other women around you, you empower others. What happened with me is that, again, I did not share anything about what was going on. Eventually, I became pregnant and I didn't want my daughter to grow up like me without a dad. So I kind of stood through it and I would call the police. When the police would come, he would harass me. So I would say, you know what, it was just a little argument, and not file the report completely. That's a big mistake. Don't do that. Always just tell the police, anybody, your neighbor, what's going on, how you're feeling, speak on it. From all of that, I had dozens of police reports that later in life, I learned that something called a women's battery syndrome, which is kind of like PTSD. I was just physically and mentally drained of never letting anyone know what was happening, that eventually I blew up. I got into a physical fight where I actually fought back. I ended up calling the police and it was his home, so I was the one getting arrested. To make a long story short, I ended up in jail for 9 months. About 9 months. And while in jail, I learned that it's not just me going through these things. It's hundreds of women, especially women of color, that, go through situations like this. And from being in jail, I came about just browsing through ideas of how can I help these women. And that's part of how M.A.M.S came along after years, just wanting to help those women and bringing awareness and helping them see that they are worth individuals, that, their experiences does not define who they are, or, any kind of comments that they might hear from others, and just know that they are brave by speaking up. They are strong, they are empowering, and they are doing something not just for themselves, but as I mentioned earlier, for others. And you're breaking generational, is that the word, cycles, for future generations of your own family and just others to not fall into the same traps. So my part of my healing was a lot had to do through education, meeting others, other empowering women, through writing, and sharing my story. Once you find that voice in you, I promise you, you will not want to go back to any of whatever you went through in the past. And that is beautiful. I want to also share a little bit of what to do if somebody you know is going through a situation of domestic abuse. It can be hard to know what to say to a person experiencing domestic violence and family violence. And some effective ways to support someone could be by listening, not say something back, oh, it's because of this, or like just listen to them, just have that give them that space to vent. Whether you agree with things or not, just let them vent and listen. Validate and believe them. Be clear that they, like as Sonia mentioned, they are not to blame. It's not their fault. And just help them to seek help. Let them know they're not alone. There's many resources that are around us in San Diego. Claudia will share some of them, even within our college community. So also, if you see something happening or experiencing a situation, don't be afraid to speak on it too. Because a lot of times we don't want to get involved and we say, oh, well, it's not my business, but don't do that. You never know if that would be, recently we've seen so many cases within San Diego of domestic abuse that is really scary, what if that was a person you could have spoke about, or share, like, what, this is happening. So don't be afraid to share. Your voice is very important. I want to also just share that while you're going through this process, it's not easy. It's not something that's going to take a day or two or a month. As Brenda said, she's still going through it. She's still having those emotions. Healing takes, it could take a lifetime. It's a day at a time, but just remember that it's to move forward, to continue and look ahead in life and look at who you want to be and validate your feelings, your strength and who you definitely are meant to be. So I hope that I brought some sense of support somehow, to know that I'm not just myself here, but I'm sure all of these women, strong women in this space now will be willing to, help with any situation. So please seek help if anything is happening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna, for sharing your story. And really, I think that part, again, that stands out in your recovery is just how important it was for you to start speaking up and having a voice again, and how you kept these secrets for so long. I mean, even as you talked about in childhood. So having that voice and speaking up was really an important point that you made for all of us. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, everyone, for being here today.
Before we open it up for other questions from anyone else in this space, I really want to give also Sonia and Brenda an opportunity. Was there anything that you all wanted to share from your experience of how you've been able to move forward or heal or recover that you want people to know?
Go ahead, Brenda. Go ahead.
You can go ahead, Sonia.
No, go for it. You go.
So I just wanted to speak a little bit more on like how I felt afterwards and everything. I mean, there is a little piece of me that still thinks that it's my fault, regardless of I wasn't the one who lied, which was the main reason what made me realize that it wasn't my fault, that I wasn't the one who lied. I wasn't the one who used anger and that threat of that emotional threat that either I wasn't good enough or whatever the case is. I wasn't the one who was threatening. I wasn't the one who was who lied. Those were the things that made me realize that it was not my fault. And it was hard for me to realize that, because to this day, I don't know, maybe I did do something wrong, maybe not, but going back at it, like, that person was way older than I was. That person lied. That person, used emotional threat, used just that he wasn't going to talk to me anymore or something, to that extent. Although I'm so glad that a lot of women are strong enough to already have that embedded with them, or to learn that fairly young, and that are strong and everything. I did not feel that way at all for most of my life, and that just really helped me understand how desperate I was for somebody to like me that much, and somebody took advantage of that. And that's how I finally understood that it just was not my fault, and that I should not feel guilty of the approach of how I took things, because it wasn't me who did all of that. So, yeah.
Thank you for sharing that part of your story. And it sounds like that's also how you moved into more of your recovery and healing, was recognizing all those things.
Okay. Well, for me, I didn't, like Anna, I didn't have a father around. I did have a grandfather somewhat there, and some tios, some uncles. So I used to think more like a man. So I think that was what made it easier for me to realize that it wasn't my fault, because I knew. I mean, there were times where I got angry at myself for staying as long as I did, not leaving sooner. However, who knows how the situation would have turned out? It could have gone worse. It could have, for me, the healing, I think that's why I do so much for everybody else. My clubs, the clubs I'm involved in, my neighborhood, I give back. See, for me, and honestly, I don't even, and Anna could probably tell you this too, I don't really deal with it very well. I don't kind of try to push it away to the side, I think. Like, if it's not there, it's not, don't think about it, it's not there, kind of thing, even though I know I shouldn't. And I don't know. I think I keep myself occupied. That's how I deal with it.
I appreciate you sharing that, supporting others, giving back, like you said, keeping yourself busy has been helpful. And I also appreciate you sharing what's challenging, right? Which is sometimes you think maybe you should spend a little more time on it or not push it away. I really appreciate you. You kind of looking at that for yourself, and what you just said is really important. Yeah. Okay. Oh, go ahead, Anna.
If I can just add to, to the conversation we're having right now, something very important is that these men won't change. Just how this kind of behavior, I believe is learned, by observing. It's through family, something they saw maybe growing up, and they took it with them, or I don't know, some kind of psychological, I don't want to get into that because I'm not really, I don't know if I'll say the correct things, but they need healing themselves before, they can take care of you, before they can love you. They need to love themselves. So somebody that treats you that way does not love themselves, does not care for themselves. And when seeking someone to, 1 second, okay? Okay, 1 second, it's okay. I'm sorry about that. When seeking to a partner or dating, it's very important to have that, to know what you want, what you deserve, what you don't want in a relationship. And, you watch for the red flags, I know I did it myself. I just wanted to have somebody, so I just ended up with that person. And not that it was my fault, but it was my choice, but it's never your fault when somebody mistreats you. And that's something very important to remember and take with you. So moving forward, just be aware of the red flags and learn more about them growing up, their family. Talk about those things, and you'll get to learn a lot about that person, because sometimes domestic abuse comes after all the sweet talking, and everybody can be nice in the beginning, and you don't want to be stuck in the middle of that. So that's just something to came to mind from listening to everyone. And again, I can't stress enough, like, just seek help, talk about it, look through different resources, whatever it is that can help you have that support.
Thank you so much, Anna, for sharing that. It's really helpful information. And you're right. I know you said you didn't think you were going to explain it well, but you did a beautiful job when you talked about the learned behavior. And you're absolutely right. I mean, you're absolutely right with what you were describing. So I appreciate you kind of expressing that to everyone. For our last kind of 10 minutes, I just want to open it up to any other questions anyone wants to ask, or anything further that anyone wants to share about.
This is Guadalupe. I'd like to ask each of you to think about, what advice would you give to yourself if you were thinking about, back when you're like 15 to 17, when you first start dating? What would be a red flag that you know now that you wish you would have known then about dating, and how that impacts like control factors, like behaviors that you can spot now that you wouldn't back then, and would have helped you make better decisions in connecting to a partner?
Well, I think, okay, well, I can answer that first. Sorry, I have my screen off. I think for me, not having a father and looking for that father figure, I know it made me more of an easy target for somebody like that. I know that possessiveness, telling me, trying to be controlling. Before, when I was young, I thought that was, he loves me because he's so protective, he's so controlling, he's so jealous, now, now I know that's totally not the, the way to act when you love somebody, so for me, it would be, the controlling and the possessive, the jealous, that's what I would tell myself, to watch out for that, love doesn't hurt, basically, is what I would tell myself.
That makes a lot of sense what you're saying. Brenda, did you raise your hand?
Yes. Well, a couple of I guess of the first signs that might be a little bit more like helpful, that I would have definitely told myself before, would be the consistent communication. If you, or if we are all somebody that are hardworking, and you're going to school, or you understand that you put yourself first, you're not consistently on the phone texting one individual the whole day, every day. So that would be one of the biggest warning signs, just because it's an unhealthy habit, regardless of how old you are or anything, and that just creates that kind of dependency when you can't honestly respond back because you're driving or something, and then they get angry for it when it was no big deal. That anger, that is now a direct cause because you didn't answer back, would be one of the biggest red flags that that I would have told myself to look out for. And that goes for everybody. That's not something healthy, regardless whether it's a friendship or a romantic relationship. That is completely unhealthy. And one of the biggest and fastest way to notice that there's something a little suspicious going on.
Thank you for that, Brenda. And Anna, I see your hand.
I think for me would be the importance of no. I think no, saying no is a sign of respect, not just for yourself, but for others. And if in the beginning of the relationship, somebody does not appreciate that, then for me, that would be a red flag, something I didn't know then that I know now. So, you know, and it can be for the simplest things. You know, if you say no to something, I can't right now, or I don't feel like it, I don't want to, and somebody doesn't respect your wishes, I think that is a big red flag. And something that I didn't see then, like I'll say, you know what, not right now, I'll see you later, and then show up in your house, 15 minutes later, and I believe it was Sonia that mentioned, oh, that's sweet, he still came. It's not, it's something actually very dangerous. So I think it would be just the actual word no.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that very powerful word, right? Very important word to know in terms of boundary setting. And like you're saying, knowing those warning signs, somebody not respecting those boundaries. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing. So a couple things before we kind of come to the end of our time. I'm wondering if it would be helpful if I shared my screen with some numbers and resources on it, and being able to either like take a picture of that, or those watching can be able to see just some important resources and numbers if you're ever in need. So would that be helpful for me to take a minute to show that? Okay, let me see here. Guys, let me know. Can you see that okay? Okay. So I'll just leave it up here for a brief moment. The first part is domestic violence hotlines. So numbers that you can call throughout the community to receive support around domestic violence, Women's Resource Center number, and then below are just some other numbers and resources that might be helpful, some non-emergency numbers, a line around housing and other services. So feel free to take a picture with your phone. I'll just leave it up here for a second before we come back and conclude. All right, I'll bring us all back. So I know I'm going to hand it over, I think back to you, Yen, in a minute, but I just want to thank everybody here, especially the panelists who were able to share their personal stories and really take a risk today, being vulnerable and opening yourself up to sharing in these questions. I hope that it, and I know it will, really impact others who maybe needed to hear some of these messages. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Brenda, Sonia, and Anna, for sharing your story. I'm so touched by your story and your courage and your openness. And also, thank you, Claudia, for giving us a presentation. And thank you, Mary, for serving as a moderator. And thank you, everyone, for attending our event of Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And we hope to see you at our future events as well. Thank you. Bye. Have a great night.